Welcome to After Dark Horrors. If you're new here, you've just stepped into a world where the ordinary becomes extraordinary, and the mundane hides the macabre. I'm your host, and tonight, we're unlocking doors that should have stayed sealed. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you don't want to miss what lurks in the shadows of our next story. And remember, these stories are best experienced with headphones, in the dark, when you're completely alone. Tonight's collection comes from viewers just like you, people who thought they were simply cleaning out a storage unit, looking for forgotten treasures or abandoned memories. What they found instead will make you think twice before bidding on that next abandoned locker. These are their stories. 10 true accounts of storage unit horror that will chill you to your core. Let's begin. Story 1. Unit 313. Never believed in signs or omens until I bought the contents of Unit 313 at a storage facility auction in Phoenix, Arizona. This happened 3 years ago, but I still wake up some nights, convinced I can hear that sound. Metal scraping slowly across concrete, getting closer. My name is Marcus, and I used to make a decent living buying abandoned storage units. The adrenaline rush of not knowing what you'd find, combined with the potential for profit, made it addictive. I'd been doing it for 5 years when I attended the auction at Desert View Storage Unit 313 stood out immediately. Not because of its size, it was a standard 10x10, but because of how the other bidders reacted to it. When the auctioneer called the number, several regular buyers I knew simply shook their heads and stepped back. Tom Garrett, who'd been in the business for 20 years, actually left the auction entirely when 313 came up. What's wrong with that one? I asked Sandra, another regular. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Some units, you just know to leave alone. But I was young, cocky, and convinced they were trying to psych out the competition. When bidding started at $50 with no takers, I raised my hand. I got it for $75. The auctioneer handed me the key with an expression I couldn't read. "You sure about this one, son?" "Why does everyone keep asking me that?" He just shrugged and moved on to the next unit. I cut the lock that afternoon. The door rolled up with a grinding screech that set my teeth on edge. Inside, the unit was surprisingly organized. Furniture covered in sheets lined the walls. Boxes, each meticulously labeled with dates rather than contents, were stacked in perfect rows. Everything was covered in a fine layer of dust except for a path down the center, as if someone had been walking through recently. The dates on the boxes went back 40 years. The newest was dated just 6 months ago, which was impossible. This unit had been abandoned for over 2 years, according to the paperwork. I started with the furniture, pulling sheets off to reveal antique pieces in perfect condition. A Victorian writing desk, a mahogany wardrobe, matching nightstands, easily worth several $1,000s. My initial hesitation melted away as I calculated the profit. Then I found the mirror. It stood against the back wall, covered by a thick velvet cloth that seemed newer than everything else. The cloth was held in place by industrial-strength tape, wrapped around multiple times as if someone desperately wanted to keep it covered. Curiosity won. I carefully cut through the tape and pulled away the cloth. The mirror was enormous, nearly 7 feet tall with an ornate silver frame. The glass was perfect, not a single crack or imperfection, but something about it felt wrong. When I looked at my reflection, it seemed delayed, just by a fraction of a second, but enough to be disorienting. I decided to leave it for last and focus on the boxes. The first box, dated 1983, contained photographs, hundreds of them, all of the same house from different angles, different times of day, different seasons. The house looked normal enough, a 2-story colonial with white siding. But in every photo, all the windows were covered from the inside with newspaper. The second box, dated 1987, held more photos of the same house, but now There were people in some of them, a family of 4 parents and 2 children. Their faces had been carefully cut out of every single photograph. Box after box revealed the same pattern. Photos of the house, photos of the faceless family, and starting in 1995, something else. Photos taken from inside the house, looking out through gaps in the newspaper-covered windows. These showed the street, neighboring houses, and occasionally people walking by. But it was the boxes from 2000 onward that made my skin crawl. The photos were now of other houses, dozens of different homes, all with their windows covered, and in each set, the same progression. Exterior shots, families with removed faces, then photos from inside looking out. The final box, the one dated 6 months ago, contained photos of my neighborhood, my street, my house. My hands shook as I flipped through them. There was my home from every angle. There was my family, my wife, my 2 kids, with their faces meticulously cut out. And at the bottom of the box, a single photo taken from inside my daughter's bedroom, looking out through her window at night. We'd only moved into that house 8 months ago. I dropped the photos and backed away, my heart hammering. How was this possible? Who had been in my house? I pulled out my phone to call the police, but as I turned, I caught movement in the mirror. My reflection was smiling. I wasn't. I ran. Left everything, the furniture, the boxes, even my van keys in my panic. I drove my wife's car straight home, breaking every speed limit. My family was safe. The windows were normal, uncovered. I installed a security system that night and cameras the next day. I never told my wife what I'd found. How could I? But I couldn't stop thinking about Unit 313. I called the storage facility the next morning, planning to tell them to clear it out, to burn everything. Unit 313? The manager said, confused. We don't have a Unit 313. That building only goes up to 300. I drove back. The building did indeed end at Unit 300. Where 313 had been, there was just a concrete wall, weathered and old, as if it had always been there. I found Tom Garrett at the next auction and cornered him. Well, what do you know about Unit 313? His face went pale. You opened it? It doesn't exist anymore. The unit, it's gone. He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. Listen to me very carefully. Check your mirrors, all of them. If you see anything that isn't your reflection, cover them immediately. And whatever you do, don't look at them at night. Tom, what are you talking about? Every few years, that unit appears at random facilities. Different number, but those of us who've been around know the signs. The person who opens it, they become the next photographer. The next what? But Tom was already walking away. Check your mirrors, he called back. And pray you're not too late. That was 3 years ago. I covered every mirror in my house that night. My wife thinks I developed a phobia. We've moved twice since then, but I still keep them covered. Because sometimes, late at night, I hear it, metal scraping against concrete. And I know that somewhere in some storage facility, Unit 3113 is waiting for the next buyer, waiting with photos of their house, their family, and an empty box dated tomorrow. Story 2. The Inheritance Locker. Tension builder, clock ticking, growing louder, then sudden silence. My grandmother always said that some inheritances come with a price. I thought she meant taxes or family drama. I never imagined she meant this. I'm Rachel. And this happened last year when I inherited not money or jewelry from my recently deceased Aunt Margaret, but a storage unit in Portland, Oregon. I barely knew Aunt Margaret. She was the family recluse who'd attended exactly 3 family gatherings in my entire life. But for some reason, she left me her storage unit and a note that simply said, "Keep it locked, keep it fed, pass it on." The lawyer who handled her estate seemed nervous when he handed me the key. "Did you know your aunt well?" he asked. "Not really. Why?" "She paid for this unit 50 years in advance. Very unusual. She was very specific about it going to you. The storage facility, Riverside Storage, was old but well-maintained. The manager, an elderly man named Carl, recognized Aunt Margaret's name immediately. Unit 87, he said without checking any records. She was here every week, regular as clockwork. Tuesday afternoons, 3 p.m. exactly. Every week? For how long? Since before I started here, and that was 15 years ago. Previous manager said the same. Goes back at least 40 years. He led me to the unit, then stopped about 10 feet away. I'll wait here. You're not coming? Carl shook his head. Your aunt had rules. Only she went near that unit. Now, I suppose, only you. The lock was unusual, an old brass padlock that looked handmade. The key was equally unusual, ornate and heavy. It turned smoothly, despite its apparent age. Inside, the unit was smaller than I expected, maybe 5x5. A single bulb provided dim light. The walls were lined with shelves, and on those shelves were hundreds of mason jars. Each jar was filled with what looked like a dark, viscous liquid. In the center of the unit was a chest freezer, humming quietly. A notebook sat on top of the freezer. Aunt Margaret's handwriting filled the pages, dates going back 53 years. Each entry was simple, a date and the word fed. The last entry was a week ago, the day she died. I opened the freezer. Inside were packages wrapped in butcher paper, each labeled with dates. The oldest visible package was dated 1970. They were organized chronologically, and there were dozens of them, maybe hundreds, layered deep. I didn't open any of them. Something about the size and shape made me step back. That's when I noticed the scratch marks on the inside of the unit door. Deep gouges in the metal, as if something had tried to claw its way out. But the scratches were old, painted over multiple times. I found more notebooks in a box by the door. Aunt Margaret's journal, dating back to when she first rented the unit. The early entries were panicked, desperate. Found it in the basement of the old house. Thought it was dead. It wasn't. Can't kill it. Tried everything. Fire makes it grow. It needs to eat. Once a week or it gets restless. The jars keep it calm. The meat keeps it fed. This is my burden now. The entries became more routine over the years, but one from 10 years ago stood out. Chose Rachel. She's strong, practical, won't ask too many questions. Won't try to be a hero. She'll understand that some cages must never be opened. I heard a sound from the back of the unit, a wet sliding noise. One of the jars on the highest shelf was moving. Not much, just a subtle shift, but in the dim light, I could swear I saw something pressing against the glass from the inside. I backed out of the unit and locked it. Carl was still waiting, now sitting on a bench across from the unit. You saw? He asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Your aunt was a good woman, responsible. Never missed a week, even when she was sick. The one time she had surgery and couldn't come, she hired a service to... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Maintain things. What did she hire them to do? Deliver packages, fresh packages. Every Tuesday. What kind of packages? Carl stood up. The kind you don't ask about. There's a card in the office, the service she used. They're expecting your call. Your aunt set up a trust to pay for it indefinitely. I called the number that afternoon. The man who answered seemed to be expecting me. Ms. Rachel, we're sorry for your loss. Your aunt was very organized. We have our standing order, Tuesday delivery to Unit 87, 3 p.m. Should we continue? What exactly are you delivering? Your aunt specified that information was need to know. Do you need to know? I thought about the freezer, the packages, the jars. No, just continue the deliveries. That was a year ago. I go every Tuesday now, just like Aunt Margaret did. I check the notebook, write fed, and lock the door. I don't look at the jars anymore. I definitely don't open the packages. But last month something changed. There was a new notebook on the freezer and a single entry in handwriting I didn't recognize. Thank you for your service. The contract is almost complete. I don't know what contract. I don't know what's being fed, but I know that Aunt Margaret kept it contained for 53 years, and now it's my turn. The lawyer called yesterday. He said Aunt Margaret left him instructions to contact me after 1 year. There's a second storage unit, one she'd been visiting on Fridays. I pick up the key tomorrow. God help me. I think I'm going to open it, because if Tuesday is feeding day for Unit 87, I need to know what happens on Fridays. Story 3. The Collection. Every collector understands the thrill of finding that rare piece, that holy grail item that completes a set. But some collections should never be completed. I learned this the hard way when I purchased the contents of a storage unit in Salem, Massachusetts. My name is David, and I specialize in antique toys and collectibles. When Unit 1428 came up for auction, I could see vintage toy boxes through the small gap at the bottom of the roll-up door. The distinctive, colorful packaging of 1950s and 60s toys was unmistakable. I won the auction for $3,000, steep for a storage unit, but vintage toys in good condition could easily net 5 times that amount. When I opened the unit, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. The entire 10x space was filled with pristine vintage toys, many still in their original packaging. Wind-up robots, porcelain dolls, tin soldiers, music boxes. A collector's dream spanning nearly a century of toy manufacturing. But there was an order to how everything was arranged that struck me as odd. The toys weren't grouped by type or era, but by something else I couldn't quite identify. Each section had a small placard with a child's name and 2 dates. Timothy Morrison, 1950–1959. Sarah Chen, 1978–1985. Michael Thompson, 1993–2000. Birth and death dates. I realized with a chill there were 43 placards in total. The toys in each section seemed to correspond to what would have been popular during each child's lifetime. Timothy's section had Roy Rogers cap guns and Howdy Doody puppets. Sarah's had Star Wars figures and strawberry shortcake dolls. Michael's contained Pokemon cards and Beanie Babies. At the back of the unit, I found a filing cabinet. Inside were detailed records for each child, newspaper clippings, obituaries, and extensive notes in spidery handwriting. Each child had died between the ages of 7 and 9. Different causes, illness, accidents, spread across different decades and states. No obvious connection except their ages. The last file was different. It was labeled Eleanor Vance 2017 with no end date. Inside was a photo of a young girl, maybe 7 years old, with bright red hair and green eyes. The notes were different too, not past tense observations, but present tense plans. Eleanor likes music boxes. Acquired 3 so far, prefers vintage to modern. Shows unusual interest in items from the 1960s. Birthday November 15th. Will be 8. That was only 2 weeks away. I found the music boxes mentioned in the notes. 3 of them, all from the 1960s, all in perfect condition. When I opened the first one, a small ballerina spun to a hauntingly familiar tune. Inside the lid was inscribed, "For Eleanor on her 8th birthday." The collection must be complete. I should have gone to the police immediately. Instead, curiosity made me examine the other sections more carefully. That's when I noticed the progression. Each child section didn't just contain toys from their era. It contained the exact same types of toys as the previous sections, just in versions contemporary to their time. A cap gun in Timothy's section, a laser gun in Sarah's, a foam dart gun in Michael's, a porcelain doll in the 1920s section, a baby doll in the 1950s section, an American Girl doll in the 1990s section, always the same types of toys, evolving through the decades, like someone was collecting the same set over and over, just updated for each generation. In the very first section, dated James Whitmore, 1878–1886, I found toys that looked handmade, A wooden horse, a cloth doll, a simple ball. But even these followed the pattern. The wooden horse was positioned exactly like the plastic horses in later sections. The cloth doll sat the same way as every other doll. At the very back of the filing cabinet, I found an older journal, the pages yellowed and brittle. The first entry was dated 1877. The child came to me in dreams, showed me the collection that must be built. 7 sets of 7, it said. 7 children for each set. When the 49th receives their gift on their 8th birthday, the door opens. 49 children. There were 43 placards. Eleanor would be 44. I found a business card tucked into Eleanor's file, Whimsy's Vintage Toys, with an address in downtown Salem, my shop. My business card, but I'd never seen this file before. I'd never heard of Eleanor Vance. I packed up the 3 music boxes and drove back to my shop, my mind racing. I needed to find out who Eleanor Vance was and warn her parents. But when I arrived at my shop, there was already a customer waiting, a woman with a young girl. The girl had bright red hair and green eyes. "Are you Mr. David?" the woman asked. "Someone called and said you had some vintage music boxes perfect for my daughter's birthday. It's Eleanor's 8th birthday next week, and she's been obsessed with music boxes lately." Eleanor was staring at the boxes in my hands, her eyes bright with an excitement that seemed somehow too intense for a child her age. "Where did you hear about my shop?" I managed to ask. The woman looked confused. "You called me yesterday, said you had exactly what Eleanor had been looking for. I hadn't made any calls. Can I see them?" Eleanor asked, her voice strangely mature. Before I could respond, she took one of the music boxes from my hands. The moment she touched it, the music started playing on its own, that same haunting tune. But now I recognized it. It was playing backwards. "Perfect," Eleanor said, but her voice had changed. It was older, multi-layered, as if several children were speaking in unison. "Only 5 more to collect." The woman seemed not to notice anything wrong. "We'll take all 3, she said, pulling out her wallet. I wanted to refuse, to warn her, to do something. But I found myself wrapping the music boxes, taking her money, watching them leave. That night, I went back to the storage unit. There was a new section started, Eleanor Vance 2017-2025. The 3 music boxes I'd sold were already there, displayed on a shelf that hadn't existed that morning, and there was a new file in the cabinet. David Morrison 2025. Inside was a photo of a young boy with my last name in my eyes. I don't have any children. I'm not married. But the date on the photo was clear, December 1st, 2025. I tried to destroy the collection. I tried to burn the files. Nothing worked. Every morning, everything was back in place, and the collection had grown. New toys appeared in Eleanor's section daily. I've tried to leave Salem. My car breaks down at the city limits. Flights get canceled. Trains delayed indefinitely. It's November 13th now. Eleanor's birthday is in 2 days. And this morning I found a pregnancy test in my bathroom trash. It was positive. My girlfriend says it's impossible. She's been out of town for 2 months. But the date on David Morrison's file doesn't lie. December 1st, 2025. The collection continues. 7 sets of 7, and then the door opens. I don't know what door. I don't know what's on the other side, but I know that in 2025, I'll be shopping for toys for a son I haven't conceived yet, adding to a collection that can't be stopped. 44 down, 5 to go. Story 4. Night Shift. Working night security at a storage facility sounds like easy money. Walk the halls, check the locks, watch the monitors. I thought I'd catch up on my reading, maybe listen to some podcasts. I never expected to become part of something that still makes me question reality. I'm James, and I took the night security job at Secure Store Portland 2 years ago. The facility was massive. 5 buildings, over 800 units, climate-controlled, state-of-the-art security. The pay was surprisingly good for such a simple job. and I needed the money for nursing school. My first week was exactly as boring as expected. I'd do my rounds every 2 hours, checking that exterior doors were secure and looking for any signs of break-ins. The rest of the time, I sat in the security office watching monitors and studying. It was on my 8th night that I noticed something odd. At 3:33 a.m., the motion sensors in Building C triggered. The monitors showed the hallway of the 3rd floor, fluorescent lights flickering on in sequence as something moved through them. But there was nothing there, just empty hallway and triggered sensors, one after another, as if an invisible person was walking slowly down the corridor. I grabbed my flashlight and headed to Building C. By the time I arrived, the sensors had stopped triggering. The hallway was silent except for the hum of the overhead lights. I walked the entire length twice. Nothing unusual. I checked the footage when I returned to the office. The cameras had captured exactly what I'd seen on the monitors, sensors triggering with nothing visible causing them. But at 3:47 a.m., exactly 14 minutes after it started, the pattern stopped at Unit C333. The next night, same thing. 3:33 a.m., sensors triggering in sequence, stopping at C333 at 3:47. I finally looked up the unit's rental history. It had been rented to the same person for 37 years, a Mr. Eugene Crenshaw. Payment was automated, pulled from an account monthly without fail. No one had accessed the unit in over 5 years, according to our entry logs. On my 3rd week, curiosity got the better of me. At 3:30 a.m., I positioned myself in Building C's 3rd floor hallway and waited. At 3:33 exactly, the temperature dropped. I could see my breath. The first motion sensor triggered at the far end of the hallway. Then the next, and the next. Coming toward me, the fluorescent lights flickered with each trigger, and in those flickers, I swear I could see a shape. A silhouette of a person visible only in the moment between light and dark. It passed right by me. I felt the cold move through the air, smelled something like old leather and copper. The presence continued down the hall, sensors triggering, until it stopped at C333. Then I heard it, a whisper so faint I thought I'd imagined it. "Let me out." I ran, not out of the building, but to the security office to check our records more thoroughly. Eugene Crenshaw had died 5 years ago. The exact date of his death matched the last time anyone had accessed Unit C333, but the payments continued. The account was still active, still funded. I should have left it alone. Should have just done my job and ignored the nightly visits. But after a month of watching this pattern repeat, I made a decision that changed everything. I used my master key to open C333. The unit was empty except for a single item in the center of the floor, an old wooden chair facing the back wall. The wall itself was covered in photographs, hundreds of them, all of the same man at different ages. A young man in a military uniform, middle-aged at a wedding, elderly in a hospital bed. All the photos were of Eugene Crenshaw, and in every single one his eyes had been cut out. On the chair was a notebook. I opened it to find pages and pages of the same sentence written over and over. "I'm still here." The handwriting started neat and controlled, but gradually became more frantic, desperate. The last pages were barely legible, the words overlapping and chaotic. The final entry was different. In careful, deliberate handwriting, it said, "If you're reading this, you've let me in. I'm sorry." The lights went out. In the darkness, I heard footsteps. Not in the hallway, in the unit with me, circling. My flashlight wouldn't turn on. My phone was dead. The darkness was absolute. "Thank you," a voice said, directly in my ear. 37 years I've been trying to get in. 37 years of walking these halls, unable to open my own door. "What do you want?" I managed to whisper. "To finish what I started. To collect what's mine." The lights flickered back on. I was alone in the unit, but the chair had moved. It now faced the doorway, and the photographs on the wall had changed. The eyes were back, but they were all looking at me. I left the unit and never opened it again. But the nightly visits changed after that. The sensors still triggered at 3:33 a.m., but now they showed a different pattern. Instead of walking to C333, they moved through the entire facility. Every building, every floor, systematically, and after each sensor triggered, I'd find something in the morning. A unit lock turned backwards. A light bulb unscrewed just enough to flicker. Small things, but deliberate. Then renters started complaining. They'd find their unit's contents rearranged. Nothing stolen, just moved. Boxes restacked. Furniture repositioned. All was in units where the renter had stored photographs. One woman, Mrs. Patterson, was particularly upset. Her unit contained her late husband's belongings, including photo albums. Every photograph of her husband now had the eyes cut out. But the eyes weren't gone. They were all collected in a small pile in the center of the unit. 3 months after I opened C333, I arrived for my shift to find a note on my desk. Check C334. Unit C334 had been vacant for years. I opened it to find it was no longer empty. The walls were covered in photographs again. But these weren't of Eugene Crenshaw. They were of me. Pictures from my entire life? Baby photos I'd never seen. School pictures my mother had lost years ago. Recent photos taken from angles that suggested the photographer had been in my apartment, in my bedroom, and in every photo, my eyes were intact but circled in red ink. At the back of the unit was another chair, facing another wall. This wall had a single piece of paper taped to it. Your turn to watch. I quit that night, walked out and never returned. But it didn't matter. Every night at 3:33 a.m., I wake up. I can't help it. And in those moments between sleep and waking, I see him, Eugene Crenshaw, sitting in that chair in my bedroom, watching me with those hollow spaces where his eyes should be. He's collecting something. I don't know what or why, but I know that one day I'll wake up and my eyes will be gone, added to his collection. And then it will be my turn to walk those halls, trying to get into a unit I can never open, while someone else finds the photographs. The facility called me last week, said they had my final paycheck and some personal items I'd left behind. When I refused to pick them up, they mailed them to me. Inside the package was a key to Unit C335 and a note, already paid for, 37 years in advance. I've been staring at that key for 3 days now. Tomorrow, I'm going back. I have to know what he's preparing for me. Story 5. The Bidding War. Storage unit auctions attract all types: treasure hunters, resellers, gamblers, and occasionally people looking for something specific, something they lost, something that should stay lost. I'm Carla, and I've been in the storage auction business for 12 years. I've seen divorced couples bid against each other out of spite, families fight over inherited units, and friendships end over a lucky find. But nothing compared to what happened at Westside Storage in Seattle last summer. It started as a routine auction. 20 units up for grabs, maybe 40 bidders present. The usual crowd, except for one man I'd never seen before, tall, thin, wearing an expensive suit completely inappropriate for digging through dusty storage units. He stood apart from the group, studying each of us with unusual intensity. When the auctioneer Big Mike started the bidding on Unit 19, the stranger finally moved. The unit was unremarkable, medium-sized, visible boxes of what looked like old electronics and furniture covered in sheets. Starting at $50, Big Mike announced. I raised my hand. The stranger immediately countered. 100, he said, his voice carrying an odd accent I couldn't place. 150, I responded. 500. The crowd murmured. That was too high for what we could see. 600, I said, now curious what he knew that I didn't. 5,000. Everyone turned to stare. Big Mike himself looked shocked. Sir, did you say 5,000? Yes, cash. The stranger pulled out a roll of bills. I backed off. No unit with visible junk was worth that kind of gamble. But Tom, another regular, couldn't resist the challenge. 5,100, Tom called out. The stranger's expression darkened. 10,000. Folks, that's $10,000 for Unit 19, Big Mike said, clearly flustered. Tom, you still in? Tom shook his head, bewildered. Sold for 10,000 to... Big Mike paused. Whitmore, the stranger said. Eugene Whitmore. He paid in cash and immediately approached the unit. But instead of opening it, he placed a new lock on it, a heavy old-fashioned padlock that looked handmade. Then he turned to address us all. This unit should not have been opened, he said. I've corrected that mistake. Good day. He started to leave, but Maria, one of the veteran bidders, called out, You're not even going to look inside? Whitmore stopped. I know what's inside. I put it there 43 years ago. That's impossible, Big Mike said. This facility's only been here for 20 years, Whitmore smiled, an expression that made everyone step back. This particular unit has been in many facilities. It moves when necessary. Usually I'm informed before it goes to auction. This time, someone interfered. He left without another word. Of course, we were all dying of curiosity. That night, a group of us met at Tom's place to research Eugene Whitmore. We found nothing. The name led nowhere. No social media, no public records, no mentions online. But Maria remembered something. There was a Whitmore who used to bid on units back in the 80s. Old guy, same weird vibe, but he'd be over 100 by now. We decided to go back to the facility that night just to look. Not to break in, just to see if we could peer through the gap under the door. The facility was supposed to be locked after hours, but the gate was open. The lights in the corridor leading to Unit 19 were on, and we could hear voices. We crept closer. The lock Whitmore had placed was gone, and the unit door was open. Inside, several people in what looked like hazmat suits were carefully moving boxes into a truck. The boxes were different from what we'd seen during the auction. These were metal, with biohazard symbols and warning labels. One of the workers noticed us. You shouldn't be here, she said through her suit's speaker. This area is under containment protocol. Containment for what? Tom asked. The previous owner stored biological samples improperly. We're with the CDC. This facility is closed until we clear everything. But I saw something that didn't fit. One of the metal boxes had a window, and through it something moved. Not biological samples, something aware, pressing against the glass, leaving handprints from the inside. We left quickly, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. The next day, the storage facility was open as usual. When I asked about Unit 19, the manager looked confused. Unit 19? That's been empty for months. No one's rented it since the last tenant died. It was auctioned yesterday. Eugene Whitmore bought it for $10,000. The manager pulled up his records. No auction yesterday. Next one scheduled for the 15th. That was 2 weeks away. I found Tom and Maria. They remembered the auction, remembered Whitmore, but when we talked to Big Mike, he had no memory of it. According to him, he'd been homesick yesterday. We went back to Unit 19. It was sealed with yellow tape that read, Condemned, Structural Damage. The manager said it had been like that for 6 months after part of the ceiling collapsed. But I knew what I'd seen. We all did. That night I dreamed about the auction. But in the dream, I could see inside Unit 19 before it was opened. The boxes weren't filled with electronics. They were filled with documents, photos, and film reels, all labeled with the same thing. Whitmore Experiments, subjects 1 to 47. In the last box was a logbook. The final entry read, Subject 47 has learned to manipulate memory and perception. Containment failing. If found, do not open. E. Whitmore. I woke to find a business card on my nightstand. It was old, yellowed at the edges. Eugene Whitmore, specialist in containment and erasure. Some things are better forgotten. On the back, in fresh ink. Stop looking or join them in forgetting. I stopped looking. But sometimes at other auctions I see him. Different faces, different names, but the same intense stare and willingness to pay any price for certain units. Units that, according to official records, don't exist. And after he wins them, after he places those old locks, the units disappear from memory. Everyone forgets except for those of us who've learned to recognize the signs. We don't bid against him anymore. Some units aren't meant to be opened. Some things aren't meant to be found, and some auctions never happened, except in the memories of those cursed to remember. Story 6. The Previous Owner. The best deals at storage auctions come from units where the owner died with no next of kin. No family means no one to contest the sale, no one to claim valuable items later. But sometimes the previous owner isn't as gone as the paperwork suggests. My name is Kyle, and I learned this lesson at a facility in Tacoma. Washington. Unit 66 had been abandoned for exactly 7 years when it went to auction. The previous owner, Robert Chen, had died in his apartment, undiscovered for 2 weeks. No family came forward. No friends claimed his belongings. The state took possession of his unit, and eventually it went up for sale. I won it for $300, a steal, considering its size. When I opened it, I understood why the bidding had been so low. The unit was packed with medical equipment, hospital beds, IV stands, heart monitors, boxes of supplies. It looked like someone had cleaned out a small clinic. But everything was old, from the 1960s or 70s, making it virtually worthless for resale. Still, vintage medical equipment had a niche market among collectors and film prop departments. So I started cataloging everything. That's when I found the files. Behind the equipment were filing cabinets full of medical records, but these weren't from any hospital. The letterhead read, Chen Private Practice, Specialized Treatment for Persistent Consciousness Syndrome. I'd never heard of persistent consciousness syndrome. The files described patients who remained aware during comas, surgery, even clinical death. According to Chen's notes, he'd developed a treatment, but the medical board had revoked his license before he could publish his findings. Each file contained disturbing details. Patients describing experiences while supposedly unconscious, watching their own surgeries, hearing conversations during their comas. One patient claimed to have been conscious for 3 days after being pronounced dead, aware but unable to move or speak, as preparations were made for his funeral. The final file was different. It was Robert Chen's own medical record, but written in his hand, dated after his supposed death. Day 1. They found my body today. I watched from the corner as they took me away. This isn't death. It's something else. Day 3, the funeral. Closed casket. They think I decomposed too much. They're wrong. I'm not in the casket day 7. I can move small objects now, learning to focus my consciousness. The treatment worked, but not how I expected. Day 30, returned to the storage unit. My equipment is here. My research, everything I need to continue. Day 365, I've made contact with others. The patients from my files, they're all here, stuck like me. We exist between states, neither dead nor alive. The entries continued for years, describing his existence in the unit, his experiments with consciousness, his growing ability to interact with the physical world. The last entry was dated a week before the auction. They're selling my unit. Someone will find this. If you're reading this, I'm watching. I've been waiting for someone with the right kind of mind, someone who won't dismiss this as fiction, someone who can help me finish my work. I should have left immediately, should have walked out and never returned. But I kept reading, found his research notes, his formulas, his theories about consciousness, existing independent of the body. That night in my apartment, things started moving. Small at first, a pen rolling off my desk, a book falling from a shelf, then more deliberate movements. my coffee mug sliding across the table, my laptop opening to medical websites about consciousness studies. On the third night, I woke to find all my furniture had been rearranged to match the layout in Unit 66. The medical equipment I'd been storing in my garage was now in my living room, set up exactly as it had been in the unit, and on my laptop, a new document had been created. One word: help. I started researching Robert Chen more thoroughly. The man had been brilliant before his license was revoked. His theories about consciousness were revolutionary, but considered too radical by the medical establishment. He'd claimed that consciousness could be separated from the body, maintained indefinitely, even transferred. His medical board hearing transcripts were disturbing. He'd been accused of experimenting on terminal patients without consent, keeping them conscious during and after death to study the transition. He denied nothing, claiming his work would revolutionize our understanding of death itself. A week after I'd opened the unit, I saw him, just a reflection at first, in my bathroom mirror, a shadowy figure standing behind me. But when I turned, nothing. Then shadows in my peripheral vision. All was disappearing when I looked directly at them. Finally, 2 weeks after the auction, he appeared fully. I was cataloging the medical equipment when I felt someone watching me. Robert Chen stood in my living room, translucent, flickering like a bad television signal, but unmistakably there. "You can see me," he said, his voice coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Good. Most people can't. Their minds won't accept it. What do you want?" "To finish my work, to prove consciousness persists, to show them all that death is just a transition, not an ending." He gestured to the equipment. "I need a living partner, someone to bridge the gap between states. I'm not helping you experiment on people." He laughed, a sound like wind through empty rooms. "I don't need more subjects. I have plenty. Every patient I treated, everyone who's died believing they might persist, they're all here, waiting. I need someone to document it, to publish the findings, to make the world acknowledge what I've discovered. And if I refuse, then I'll find someone else. But you've already been exposed to my research, used my equipment, breathed the air in my unit. The treatment is partially environmental, you see. Prolonged exposure makes one more susceptible to persistent consciousness." He flickered and disappeared, but his voice continued, "You're already changing. Haven't you noticed? You see more shadows lately. Hear whispers in empty rooms. Feel watched even when alone." He was right. Ever since opening Unit 66, I'd been experiencing things, seeing movement in empty rooms, hearing conversations in the static of untuned radios, finding messages written in the steam on my bathroom mirror. I tried to get rid of everything from the unit, sold the equipment, burned the files, even had my apartment professionally cleansed by 3 different spiritual practitioners. Nothing worked. Robert Chen visited nightly now, becoming more solid, more real. He showed me the others, dozens of translucent figures, all his former patients, all conscious but trapped between states. They stood in my apartment, in the storage facility, in every place connected to Chen's work. "Help us," they whispered in unison. "Finish the work. Free us." Last month I gave in. I started transcribing Chen's research, organizing his findings, preparing them for publication. Not because I want to, but because the alternative is worse. The conscious dead grow more insistent each day, their presence more oppressive. Chen says once his work is published, once the world acknowledges persistent consciousness, they'll all be able to move on. I don't know if I believe him, but I know I can't live with them watching, waiting, whispering every moment of every day. The paper is almost complete. I'm submitting it to medical journals next week under Chen's name, claiming I found it in his unit. Maybe they'll publish it, maybe they won't. But yesterday Chen showed me something that changed everything. He took me back to Unit 66, now supposedly empty and re-rented. But in his realm, the space between living and dead, it was full. Not with medical equipment, but with hundreds of conscious spirits all waiting. These are just from this facility, he said. Every storage unit, every abandoned space, every forgotten room, they're full of the persistent conscious. Millions of us waiting to be acknowledged. He smiled, an expression that looked wrong on his translucent face. Once the world knows, once everyone understands that consciousness persists, death will lose its power. No one will truly die anymore. That's not freedom, I said. That's prison, is it? Or is it evolution? The next step in human consciousness? I'm finishing his paper, but I'm adding my own warning to it. Because if Chen is right, if consciousness can persist indefinitely after death, then every person who dies believing it's possible might join the ranks of the conscious dead, and there are already too many shadows in the world. Story 7. The Midnight Auction. Not all storage auctions happen during business hours. Some occur in the spaces between midnight and dawn, when the regular world sleeps and different rules apply. I stumbled into one of these auctions by accident, and I'm still paying the price for what I bid on. I'm Nicole, and I've been a professional buyer for 8 years. I thought I knew every auction house, every storage facility, and every auctioneer in the Pacific Northwest. But terminal storage didn't appear on any of my lists. I found out about it through a missent text at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday midnight auction tonight. Terminal storage, Building 7, come alone, cash only. Do not speak unless bidding. The sender's number was just zeros. I should have ignored it. But curiosity is my weakness, and terminal storage sounded familiar, like something I'd heard in passing but couldn't quite place. I drove to the industrial district where the text directed me. The GPS led me to an abandoned area I'd never noticed before, despite driving past it hundreds of times. Terminal storage stood between two empty lots, a massive concrete building that looked older than the city itself. The parking lot had 7 cars, all different makes and models, but all with something off about them. They looked normal at first glance, but the longer I stared, the more wrong they seemed. Chrome that reflected nothing. Windows that showed different interiors depending on the angle. License plates with letters that hurt to read. Building 7's door was propped open. Inside, a narrow hallway led to an elevator that shouldn't exist. The building was only 1 story from the outside. The elevator had 13 buttons, all unmarked. The number 7 was already glowing. The elevator descended for what felt like minutes. When it opened, I stepped into an impossible space. A massive underground auction floor with stadium seating surrounding a central platform. 6 other bidders were already seated, none of them speaking, none of them quite right. One woman's shadow fell in the wrong direction. A man's reflection in the polished floor showed him standing when he was clearly sitting. Another bidder seemed to exist at a slight delay, his movements trailing a half-second behind reality. The auctioneer appeared without entering. One moment the platform was empty, the next he stood there, gavel in hand. His face was forgettable in an aggressive way, as if my mind refused to process his features. "Welcome to the terminal auction." His voice resonated from everywhere at once. 7 units tonight, 7 bidders. Each may win only one. Standard rules do not apply. The first unit materialized on the platform, not wheeled in, not revealed, simply there. A small box, ornately carved, with symbols that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. Unit 1, the recursive box, contains what was, what is, and what must never be. Opening bid 1 year. A year? I almost spoke to ask what that meant, but remembered the text's warning. The woman with the wrong shadow raised her hand. 3 years, the delayed man countered. 5 years, 2 months, 7 years, 6 months, 13 days, the shadow woman responded. Sold. The woman aged before our eyes, hair graying, skin wrinkling, posture stooping. 7.5 years of her life, gone in seconds. But she smiled as she claimed the box, cradling it like a child. The second unit appeared, a mirror in an iron frame. Unit 2, the reflection trap. Shows not what is, but what should have been. Opening bid, one memory. The bidding was fierce. Memories of first loves, childhood summers, and parents' faces were offered and lost. The winner, a young man who'd been silent until then, paid with his memory of why he'd come here. He looked confused as he took the mirror, no longer sure what he'd won or why he wanted it. By the fifth unit, I understood the pattern. This wasn't about storage units in the traditional sense. These were things that shouldn't exist, couldn't exist, but did. And the prices weren't money. They were pieces of the bidders themselves. Then the sixth unit appeared, and everything changed. It was a normal storage unit door, standard roll-up with a normal padlock. But something about it called to me. I could hear whispers from behind it, familiar voices I couldn't quite place. Unit 6, the unopened door, contains what the winner needs most, but at the cost they can least afford. Opening bid, one truth. My hand shot up before I could stop it. The truth about my sister's disappearance. The auctioneer's featureless face turned to me. That is a truth to keep, not to pay. What truth will you give? The words came without my permission. I knew she was going to disappear. I saw it in a dream 3 days before, and I said nothing. The other bidders made their offers, truths about murders, thefts, betrayals. But the auctioneer's gavel fell after each, rejecting them all, sold to the newcomer. The truth about prevention weighs heavier than the truth about action. The storage unit door was mine, but it came with a key that burned cold in my hand and instructions whispered directly into my mind. Open only when you're ready to trade places. The seventh unit never appeared. Instead, the auctioneer announced, "The final unit has chosen to remain hidden. The auction is complete. You have until dawn to leave. Those who remain become inventory." The elevator ride up felt shorter. I emerged to find my car the only one in the lot. My phone showed 12:17 a.m. Only 30 minutes had passed, but I'd been down there for hours. The storage unit door had shrunk to the size of a dollhouse door, attached to a keychain I couldn't remove from my pocket. And every night since, at midnight, it grows to full size wherever I am, in my bedroom, my car, even a hotel room when I try to run. Behind it, I hear my sister's voice telling me she's safe. She's happy, she's waiting. But also other voices explaining the trade. I can open the door and free her, but I take her place in whatever space exists behind it. I've researched terminal storage obsessively. It doesn't exist in any city records. The building I visited is just an empty lot during the day. But online, in forums dedicated to impossible things, I found others who've attended the midnight auctions. They all won something. They all paid prices they didn't fully understand. And they all carry items that shouldn't exist, boxes that contain tomorrow's obituaries, mirrors that show different versions of themselves, books that write themselves with the reader's future. One woman claimed she'd been collecting these items for years, trying to understand their purpose. She said terminal storage appears in different cities, always at midnight, always with 7 units and 7 bidders. The items auctioned are things lost between dimensions, things that fell through cracks in reality, things that were never supposed to exist but do anyway. She also said that everyone who attends the auction is marked. We can see things others can't, the spaces between seconds, the shadows that fall upward, the doors that lead nowhere. And eventually, we all open our won items, use them, and pay the full price. What happens then? I asked. We become inventory, she replied, for the next auction. Last week, I got another text from Zeros. Midnight auction tonight. Terminal storage, building 13. You may observe, but not bid. I went. I couldn't help it. The pull was too strong. This time, I watched from the shadows as 7 new bidders won 7 impossible things. I saw them pay with years, memories, truths. I saw the wonder and fear in their eyes as they claimed their prizes, and I saw the previous winners, the ones who'd opened their items, used them, paid the final price. They stood behind glass cases around the auction floor, conscious but frozen, with placards describing what they'd traded for what they'd won. One case held a man who'd traded his ability to die for immortality. Now he stood eternal, unchanging, aware but unable to interact with anything ever again. Another contained a woman who'd won the power to change the past. She existed in all timelines simultaneously now, experiencing every possible version of her life at once, forever. My sister's case was empty, waiting. The placard read, "Reserved for the one who chooses another's freedom over their own safety." The door in my pocket grows heavier each day. The voices behind it grow louder each night, and I know that soon I'll open it. Not because I want to, but because that's what winners at the terminal auction do. We claim our prizes. We pay our prices. We become inventory for the next midnight auction, and somewhere, someone else will receive a missent text about an auction that doesn't exist in a building that can't be there. And the cycle will continue. Story 8. The transfer. When ownership of a storage unit transfers after death, sometimes more than just possessions change hands. Sometimes the responsibilities, the burdens, and the contracts transfer too. Even the ones that were never written down. I'm Marcus, and I inherited my Uncle Theodore's storage unit in Bellingham, Washington, along with very specific instructions that I foolishly ignored. Uncle Theodore was the family enigma, a professor of anthropology who'd abruptly retired at 40 and became a recluse. He lived alone, never married, and attended family gatherings sporadically. When he did show up, he was nervous, constantly checking his watch, always leaving by 8 p.m. regardless of the occasion. When he died, his will was strange, but legal. Everything went to charity except for one storage unit, which came to me with a sealed envelope marked, "Read alone." Follow exactly. Do not deviate. Inside were instructions. Visit Unit 127 every third day at exactly 8:43 p.m. Bring 2 pounds of raw meat. Type doesn't matter. Place. Meet in the silver bowl by the door. Do not look in the bowl. Count to 60 with your eyes closed. Leave. Without looking back, never miss a feeding. I thought it was a joke. Uncle Theodore had always been eccentric, and this seemed like an elaborate prank from beyond the grave. The key came with a paid receipt showing the unit's rent covered for the next 50 years, an insane expense for a prank. A special thank you to those who bravely shared their experiences with us. If you have a story of your own, a place where the ordinary became extraordinary, reach out. You can find our submission link in the description below. Be sure to like and subscribe for more tales from the shadows, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Your support helps keep these stories alive and ensures the darkness never goes unnoticed. Until next time, stay vigilant and trust your instincts. I'm your host, signing off from After Dark Horrors. Remember, some things don't come out in the storage.